Hi, and welcome to the IGDA Foundation Monthly Speaker Series. We're presenting on Game On, the movie, and we're here with filmmaker and IGDA Foundation alumni Theresa Loong. I'm Kenna Lindsay, and I'll be your host today on behalf of the International Game Developers Association Foundation, and I'm so excited to have you here. Theresa, if you could introduce yourself, share your name, pronouns, and how long you've been working in games or a games adjacent field.
Hi, well, thank you for having me, Kenna. I really appreciate it. Hi, everybody. I am Theresa Loong, and my pronouns are she, her. I've been working in games and games adjacent for about 20 years. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Can you tell us about your film, Game on the Movie, and how did it come to be?
Sure. So let's see. I have been working, as mentioned, in kind of game adjacent, right, as well as film, and over the years, some games. And so I was doing some research. So there was somebody who was working at AMC Networks, and I was consulting with them, and is Mac McCain. And Mac had suggested that, we're doing research about games. And I was thinking about, and he was thinking about like different people in the industry, right? And Brenda was one of them. And so we ended up consulting on a game about zombies. So it was a game for The Walking Dead. It was a Facebook game. And I laugh because, I make serious games, but I also make and educational games, and then I make entertaining games as well. And I think it's nice to have this breadth of experience in game making, right? Because it's a form of storytelling, right? And I also have a background in interactive and documentary. And so when I was thinking about Brenda and talking with her, right, she is so smart and so thoughtful. And the more that I got to learn about her, right, it to me, I was just finishing up another documentary that was character based. And I was like, oh, I would love to work with someone like Brenda and understand more of her story because selfishly, it's also a way that I can get some tips, right? I'd like to figure out how do you live a creative life? It's hard. As many of us know, right? It's great, but it's also hard. And so that's when I started when I mentioned to Brenda that I usually work with public television among other types of media, right? And that I was interested in working on a documentary of her if she were willing. And she said that she'd be open to the idea, but it took a few years after that to really get something going. But that's when I planted the seed. Yeah, but also the Romeros were both very generous to me even at that time because I had done a documentary, actually a personal doc about my father, and it was about his experience surviving actually as a prisoner of war in World War II, a very difficult experience. And even though that was a traditional documentary, I was also interested in what else could be done in an interactive way. So I had prototyped using the Microsoft Connect controller that some of you might know. And so using that with skeleton tracking, I had prototyped an idea of what happens if you are saluting and what happens when you're squatting. And so actually, John and Brenda both had some ideas. John with his advice about working with Wolfenstein, right, and Brenda with her serious games that she's worked on, and we can talk more about that a bit later. So they were both inspirational to me about thinking about what other types of games, what other types of stories I could tell with games, with the other stories that I like to tell in a more traditional documentary sense, if you will. Yeah. So that's how I got started, and it took years though after that. Some of my work doesn't
Absolutely.
doesn't take years, but some do because I percolate them and they start in different forms and then continue. And it's a fight to get like financing, it's a fight with myself to balance my time, right? It's a challenge to see that it coordinates with the subjects, right? And so many things have to come together. So I just share that because I think with a lot of both people who do independent film and personal work and other work, right? We have all these different conflicting priorities, and sometimes it feels hard to get the momentum and to keep it going. And I think that it's like not to give up, right? I just
Mhm.
want to encourage people to keep going. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, and you shared a trailer for the film with me. Let me go ahead and share my screen so we can take a look at that.
My life in many ways is a game space.
Hi, I'm Brenda. I run a company called Romero Games. Between John and I, we've worked on a lot of different games. We've worked on Dungeons and Dragons, Ghost Recon. John created Doom, Doom 2, Quake. We've made a bunch of games and we've been making them for 36 years now.
He's the absolute love of my life. I think we'd be horrible spouses for other people. I've been asked more than I can even imagine, having ever been asked, what it's like to be a woman in the game industry. You can't take the experience of one and say that that's everybody. Is there definitely a disparity in the industry? Yes. I would like you to fix it.
Yep.
So it gets put to bed. So between John and I, we have 6 kids. Of them, 3 of the 4 that are here are pretty hardcore gamers.
This is my kid, this is Mesa. And when she was 7 years old, she came home from school. I asked her, what'd you do today? So she said, we talked about the Middle Passage.
She learned all the buzzwords. The boats came down to Africa, and then that's where they got their slaves, and they go across the ocean, and that's the Middle Passage. And she just paused as if she was just reading the laundry list, and she said, can I play a game, Mommy? I said, sure, but I gave her these pieces. And I made a game on the spot that was about the Middle Passage. So we're going across the ocean, and she's rolling high. And so she was using most of her food. A little past the middle point, she said, Mommy, I don't think we're going to make it. Did this really happen?
Coming up with ideas for games is easy. Actually making it come out right when there's 1,000 ways for it to go wrong can be hard, but experience helps. And you surround yourself with people that are smarter than you are, which is why John has me.
So the game we're working on now it's like a 1920s mobster business simulation where you start out on the bottom. So this is a mugshot photo, right? And I love how just unbelievably confident this guy looks. Game dev, it's incredibly creative, but there's stress. My buildings right now are fucked. Everything in my world is fucked.
Bullshit!
A lot of times, especially if you're doing it right, you don't necessarily know how it's going to turn out.
That was really fabulous.
Thank you. So I
Um,
hope that gives you a little idea of, yeah, of what I'm working on.
could you tell us more about what it was like to work with the Romeros? They seem like a really fun family.
Yeah, let's see. So Brenda and John and their family used to live in the United States, and then they moved over to Galway, Ireland, which is on the west side of Ireland. And they moved with a bunch of the family members, including some of the children who are still in school, right? And so they're very generous. Like whenever you're interviewing a subject, whether it's for background for a game, right, for a project or for documentaries, there needs to be this give and take, right? And there needs to be a lot of trust that you're establishing with the person that you are interviewing or the people that you're interviewing, right? Uh, or I would even, venture to say with a lot of things, there's trust, right? When you have a business dealing, when you're working together, a lot of it, right? Our IGDA Foundation alumni, there's a lot of trust that's been built or that needs to be developed. And so, what I'm very grateful for is that Brenda, we developed trust and that they took a chance, right, to let me into their lives. It's not easy having a camera in front. I mean, we do live in a environment now where many people are used to that, but still, it's not for most of us, it's not easy, right? Especially if you want to get the quote unquote authentic self, right? To try as much as possible to hear stories or to follow someone around, right? This is different than reality TV. This is documentary work, or at least how I see it, right? And the editing process is different than in what is a quote unquote reality show. I mean, reality TV has its place, right? But this it's a little different than the work that I'm doing. And so yeah, it was a real pleasure working with them. They're super busy. and they're just very generous with their time. But and it requires coordination, right? A lot of coordination and some luck, and then keeping the momentum going. Yeah. So,
Absolutely. Um, this is a new question for me, but could you talk a little bit about the difference between your documentary work and reality TV from your perspective as a filmmaker? I think that there's a lot of conflating that happens between the two for audience members.
sure. So I guess the first thing is to say I've never worked in reality TV, so I don't. This is my perspective from someone who hasn't worked in it, right? And so, for example, to me, reality TV is like Good Housewives or like Big Brother. That was a number of years ago. Things where they're highly edited and almost like you're goading people, goading. You're like encouraging people almost to like provoke problems and fights and drama, right? The kind of work I do is not about provoking any of that. It is about following characters or character or characters, almost like being a fly on the wall, right? And then balancing that verite, the everyday life, with interviews and intersplicing that with other content, right? And so the reason why I believe it's different is that, or I know that it's different, is that there is this level of I am while I am finding the story, it's true that reality TV is like that as well. I'm not there to pick a fight or provoke my subjects, right? I'm there to tell a story that is, I hope, as like journalistically true as possible. Yeah. So
Mhm. Thank you for unpacking that a little bit for us. You also mentioned a moment ago the importance of building trust with your subject. Could you talk a little bit about how you build trust with a subject or with your audience?
yes. So let's see. I do it the way that I think that I can do it is when people can look well now people can look at some of the other films I've worked on or my other projects in general, right? Which include other types of games, other types of interactions, other types of performance art as well. So now people can look at that and get a sense of what I do, which is everything from serious to quirky and like lighthearted, right? Uh, and I do approach my art with like seriousness. I mean, I laugh a lot too, right? But there's a seriousness in terms of like trying to make a difference, right? Or whatever that purpose is, trying to tell the story and get it right. So I think that a lot of it is in how I interact and how I do my research, right? And work with teams and I'm as honest as I can be, right? But the other
Mhm.
thing is, and maybe people might have a question of, well, if you don't have all those bona fides, then what happens, right? Or if it's someone who doesn't know you. So there's an example that of another project that I'm working on where the person I had shown them work that I had done a documentary about engineering for Nova. It's called Building Stuff, Change It. And so it's really, bringing to life all the different wonderful things engineers do. So I sent that as an example of the work that I do. But it turns out that this subject, she ended up looking and finding this other film which was about my dad, Every Day is a Holiday, this other documentary. And it's a personal documentary and she did her research and to her by watching it, she saw the level of trust that my dad had with me. And you would think, oh, we're family. Of course, he would trust me. But actually, I was surprised too. It took him a while because I think he felt like people wouldn't believe his story is so amazing. And like Brenda's story, so amazing, right? And so I think it is from both looking at other work, doing research, as well as though I tend to really like, and hopefully you can tell even through Zoom, like I care and I do things with love, like a lot of love. And I think when you approach that with intention, right? And you make your intention clear and you're open about that. Yeah, it's a risk, but I do think it's worth it and I think it shows.
I think it shows too. There's a carefulness that I think that your work has that I really appreciate. And I guess kind of leading into my next question, What is your favorite part of making films, and why did you get into making films?
So I think there's a similarity to why I make games. And I love to hear if people want to put it in the chat too. Like if you have similarities with what I'm saying, it's that idea that there are so many amazing stories out there and that people have something to say, right? I have something to say. And I would like to also leverage voices, amplify voices of other people who I think they have something to say in their stories, right? I'm also interested in other types of like narrative, so not fiction as well as nonfiction, but I love creative nonfiction. Why? Because sometimes I think truth is stranger than fiction. And sometimes it's just so unbelievable of what happens in life, right? That said, I also love the fiction realm as well. It's just that for me, it is for some reason it's easier for me. For other people, it's much easier to do fiction. I think for me, it's much easier to do well, easier, but kind of easier to do nonfiction and then potentially hybrid, and then occasionally for me, narrative. But yeah, I just find such a joy in storytelling. And film was a medium that I thought is just like there's something so cool about being able to like it used to be that we would all have a given time when we would watch something together. Right now, time it's different. Sometimes there's what's called appointment viewing, and other times we're watching different medium, right? On different schedules. That's still interesting to me. But yeah, there's something about just being able to control the story or try to control the story, help shape it, putting together the visuals and the sound that I find really satisfying as a director and as a producer, but definitely as a director. Yeah.
Awesome. Um, I'm also curious, what was it like to work on public television? And do you have a favorite thing that you learned during that era of your work?
Yes. So let's see. I had interned at Channel 13, which I'm based in New York. And so that's the public television station here in New York and New Jersey. And one of the favorite things, so I worked on both science programs and programs about China and programs about engineering and programs about disabled people who do amazing things, uh, STEM and STEAM and initiatives. And so the thing that I really enjoy is that I would receive feedback from people all over the country. And I mean, with my other projects also internationally, but with public television, because it was in the United States that we were focused on, it like there were folks in Alaska. Someone said they watched some program, they happened to be up. It was 4 in the morning, and it was every day is a holiday, and it really inspired them. It really moved them. Like they were feeling kind of low, or this is paraphrasing, and watching it really like boosted their spirits. And when you get, emails like that and input and feedback, there's nothing better to know that, that I've made a difference or that, caused someone to think or to yeah, to like better their day, right? The other thing though that really stuck with me is that my mentor, Bill Einreinhofer, Bill is a mentor of mine. He has executive produced work of mine. When I was interning for him, his advice was like, and how he treated people was like always, if you can, all be nice. Because also when you're at a different point in your career, other people will also be growing. So now that he's been in the world for many years, like so we've helped each other now. And he's also mentored other people. And then they in turn have helped him. So it becomes this like mutually beneficial relationship, right? And I find that in games as well. So both in film and in games. So yeah, but public television really has a very a soft spot in my heart. And we're hoping, right? And I'm hoping that we can keep figuring out what its place in the world, in addition to right games, in addition to like YouTube and Discord and Twitch, these other like really interesting channels. Yeah.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you so much. My next question for you is, what drew you to making a documentary about the games industry?
So I really enjoy both playing games and making games, right? And I think that uh I thought that for me, I wanted a way, when I'm really fascinated about something, I want to learn more about it and I want to like share it with other people. So, for example, I wanted to learn how to drive a Zamboni, an ice resurfacer. So I learned how to do that a number of years ago.
That's so cool.
So, and occasionally there's something that just sticks in my head, you know? And so with games, it's like, you know what? And things have dramatically changed over even the past 5 or 10 years, right? Games are much more in the forefront now of a lot of people's minds, whereas even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, mm, I think the pandemic changed things and there was more of an acceptance. Like we found our tribe, right? In terms of like the IGDA Foundation, right? But but it's sometimes it's hard, right? Some people still are like, well, games like why are they beneficial? Because yes, it can be negative, right? But it can be very positive. And so the reason why I wanted to tell a story, and hopefully this is one of many stories that I will be able to tell, is because they do make a difference, right? Games do make a difference, and the people who make games are so diverse and interesting. And so that's why I wanted to shine a light on it because and I wanted to shine a light in a more traditional documentary style because I do think there's still something about this documentary format that um, gives stories like the attention they deserve.
I agree. Um, could you tell us more about your serious games work?
Yeah. So let's see. So, in terms of the serious games, I've made educational games. So, I've worked with the New York Hall of Science in Queens, New York, to make apps for children. So, is apps like physics and apps for learning about fractions, things like that. I've worked with museums on projects and games, both, for example, in English and Chinese, helping us look at art and look deeper. Uh, Working with the American Jewish Historical Society, looking at Emma Lazarus, who is a Jewish American poet who wrote like the "Give me your tired, your poor" on the pedestal in the Statue of Liberty. So working on like a an interactive experience. So things like that really fascinate me. And yeah, so and also I'm currently prototyping, and this is a content warning, a serious game about the working title is Bought Broken, and it's an art and healing app, an experience to help survivors of intimate partner violence and their allies, right? And so this is actually, and I'm very grateful to the IGDA Foundation because that's why I'm an alum of the prototype program. And so I created, along with with my colleagues, we created a prototype that's right now built in Unity, and then it's like puzzle pieces, putting them together. And while we're healing the object, we're also it's a metaphor for healing the self. And so yeah. So
That's really beautiful, and I can't wait to play it.
thank you. And yeah, and so I'm looking for additional partners on that as well. But I've worked with two nonprofits in New York City. I've talked to some other nonprofits upstate and I'd like to do it internationally as well. Yeah. And the New York City Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, they're supporting the project as well. So I'm looking for other partners. And it's like we keep, get a grant, keep going, fundraising, all that. But yeah, it's a project that's really important to me and I look forward to continuing it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that work. My next question for you, and acknowledging that we don't get to choose how our work impacts people, but if you could choose how your film has impact on the industry or the people who are the audience, what would that impact be?
Yes. So I would like at least 1,000 young women to consider games and games adjacent industries. That is one of the ways I want to make an impact. And and the other is to help people understand that games can be used for good, right? Like with this audience, I think we already know that, but I would like to expand that dialogue. And so to give you examples of how I think I can do that is that I've also been prototyping and want to continue to prototype showing clips from the documentary from Game On. And then I'm working on game design workshops. right. I've worked on them with high school students and with intergenerational audiences. And so with that, we show some clips and then say, like, given what you've seen with the film, right, with which models like game development, models both serious games and entertain other types of games. The prompts change, but the prompts are like, well, what interests you? Like, what interests you in the world that that you care about, that you want to make a game about? And then we do prototyping workshops. And so right now I'm doing physical board games. And then what I want to do now is partner with people to do the digital game versions and digital games as well. And so this way we have a conversation, right? So some of the games have included a game about inflation, a game about the pressures of being in high school. And I mean, just think about that, right? Like people who didn't know each other to come together and to create a game. And that's the example. Those are more serious games, right? But it's not to say that just because something is a serious game, it can also be entertaining, right? And so that's the dialogue that, yeah, that I would love to have. I saw in the comments that someone had talked about the Serious Play conference. And so I know that in the United States, that's going to be happening in Durham at Duke University in 2026. And then there's also a European version of that conference. And so, yeah, shout out for that.
It's definitely on my bucket list to get to serious play. I think it's really important work. Could you elaborate on what it's like for you to work with students and what kinds of things they're interested in and concerned about, and also your intergenerational audiences and their interest and concerns in the kinds of workshops you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. I can both talk about it through, I'm an educator both with like outside of school with workshops, and then I also teach at the university level. So I've taught at Parsons, I'm teaching at Vassar this semester, and I've also taught at NYU and at Bloomfield College, which is now part of Montclair State University. And then I've guest lectured at Hunter and at USC. So in both games and design and media and film. So it's a nice, confluence of all these different disciplines that can come together, right? Especially with games. Yeah. So the interesting things when I've taught people for workshops, right? Um, People have created games like a game helping to learn like dialects, right? Different dialects. So that's one type of game. The game that we were talking about, right? About like finances, games about serious topics of being in high school, right? And those pressure, right? Playful games, kind of like a mashup of charades and Pictionary, and so they're just like it's really interesting, different types of word games. It's interesting what comes up when people are working together. And we had one game design workshop on Governor's Island, and people ended up collaborating. I said, "Well, you could do if you want an adversarial game, but like actually people didn't want to do that." And I think it reflects both self-selecting of the folks who are participating as well as maybe what's going on in the world, right? There's so much a lot of people arguing right now that that's okay to make a game with conflict, right? But also, why not if we can work together and make cooperative games? Like that's okay too. So, yeah. So those are some of the themes that have come up with the workshops, and then some of the games, as I said, like right now there are board games, but we're also looking at the digital versions. And in addition to board, there were also games, like I said, like a charade where you're using your body, right? And I think that's really fun as well.
I have so many more questions about that, but we can talk about it later. Um, my next question for you that was from our list was about what advice do you have to young filmmakers or young game designers? And young could mean in age or in experience.
Mm. Uh, it is to go for it, right? I think sometimes, and this won't, everyone is different, so I might have different kinds of advice. One is to go for it because sometimes I struggle with self-doubt or like, oh, I have this idea, right? Is it a good idea? Well, you're not going to know. There might be some ideas that you don't end up finishing the idea, but it makes sense to start it and to do it. So I would say, like, if you think you have an idea, but you're unsure about how to go about it, one foot in front of the other, start, right? And by that I mean, okay, so I have my notebook here. So if you can start sketching it out or drawing it out, or if your strength is more talking, you can record it on your phone and just like verbalize the idea, right? And then there are these different game jams, right? Global Game Jam just happened. There are different types of hackathons. If you go to that, you can hopefully you can toss out your idea and other people would want to join with it. But other times that maybe you have to put your idea aside, but get experience at these hackathons and game jams, and you work with other people's ideas, or you collectively, collaboratively come up with an idea, right? And then you can find, right, the IGDA has branches all over the world. You can find in New York City, there's a collective called Gumbo. Uh, there are different places where you can find people who are working on games, right? Discord, there are many channels on Discord where you would be able to work on it. And I would say also, I know there are a lot of solo developers. I have worked on things as a solo dev myself, but I also know when I need help. And to the other thing to say is don't be afraid to ask for help. If somebody doesn't have the time to give it to you, then hopefully they will be honest about that, or you can tell them, be honest, right? Do you have the time? And hopefully you can find people who you can trade, right? You can barter. So in my film collective, the film shop, the filmshop.org, we sometimes barter services with each other. We pay each other when we can, but other times we collaborate, right? So whether it's people in your high school, college, professional life, you may be able to find folks who can help you out. Yeah. So that would
Ah,
be my
that's
advice.
great advice. My next question for you is, how does one get to know their audience?
Hmm. Yes, that is a great question. And it's not an easy question. I think first, you can, I try to create an idea of what the for film, right? What the film is, for games, what the game is. So I have this, and it helps with grants as well. So you say, this is the idea, right? Here's the synopsis, and then here's the treatment. In film, here's the treatment. And then there's a section usually for audience, target audience. And sometimes that can come from a gut feeling, but then that has to be tested, right? And it has to be tested with, can you find what we call comparables, right? Or similar titles? So, sure, it'd be great to say, well, there's nothing else like this out there. You can say that, but then you could say, well, however, right? Or in addition, it reminds me of like this meets that, right? Or it is, okay, well, like for me, I loved Indie Game the movie, which came out a number of years ago, right? There's also something called High Score, right? There are other game documentaries out there. So for me, it's helpful to look at then these other documentaries that were out and then who I think they reached, right? And to try to do research using the internet. And then, um, for example, with IMDb, there's something called IMDb Pro, the professional version, that if you can like borrow access or ask someone or get access to that, that helps. Now with actually with AI, it's interesting to ask AI to help search for you, right? And so these things are ways to figure out what the audience is. The other is that in my interactive work, we do user personas, and the user personas are these ideas of, okay, who is the audience? Is it someone who's in high school? Is it a parent? Is it a grandparent? And so how I'm thinking about it is, I'd love to reach young people, right? High school students. I'd love to reach young women. I'd love to reach also parents and grandparents of people who are gamers, as well as people, let's say in the 30 to 50-year-old demographic who have gamed. So both people who have gamed and people who haven't. And I'd like to reach outside that audience as well, right? But then comes time to then try to narrow down the what's called the primary audience, right? And so similar with games, and then you have to test it. So to test it, it's through my film collective. I have screenings, private screenings, right, of like the rough cut, asking friends, working with my editor, working with producers, and then Also for games, it's the same thing, right? Or similar play testing, right? Getting feedback from people who are testing. So then you either ask them or give out a survey. And what I like to use is something called the what is it, Net Promoter Score. So you may have seen this, and other people, if you have in the audience, if you want to put it in the chat, where it's like, did you enjoy the service? And it's from 1 to 5, and it's a smile. Or would you recommend this to a friend? I think is the Net Promoter Score. It's either from 1 to 9, or 0 to 9, or 1 to 10. And so if you're at like the 9 or 10, then you know, like, or would you recommend this to a friend? Then you kind of know that that's pretty good. If it's lower than that, then you can ask what else, like what would you want to see differently, right? And so we have a comment in the chat that somebody knows the MPS well, as well. And so yeah, if and I'm open to other suggestions, like I'm still figuring this out, but with tools there are ways to test. I was also testing with something called Largo.ai, Largo.ai. So that is a tool that does, using AI, does like customer audience analysis. So yeah, so some of the information there on a test of a 1 minute version of the trailer was that most likely a good audience would be an audience that has a potentially of parents who already like games, right? So that's one audience. So I'm still testing this idea.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
really awesome detailed answer about how to get to know your audience on a personal level and the tools you can use to do that better. But my next question is, what are you excited about for the future?
Oof. Let's see. I'm excited to get the film out and people more aware of Brenda and the amazing work that she's done over the years, right? And to get a dialogue going about being in games and making games. So that's what I'm excited about. I mean, I need to grow my audience, right? And so that's something that I'm excited about. Also a bit like I have a bit of trepidation about it too, but it's exciting, right? And and also seeing like what else the conversations will come out of this, right? Because like I said, I've been prototyping and doing these game design workshops. And so I want to see what other types of games we can create, um, from people being inspired by the film. So yeah.
Awesome. I'm excited to see what happens when your work reaches a bigger audience as well. Thank you so much to Theresa for being here and for the work that you're doing promoting the conversation about women and diversity in games. And also, thank you to our audience for your attendance and your awesome questions. And I hope that we all have a fabulous conversation again like this really soon.
Thank you, Kenna. Thanks, everyone.